Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today I'm advocating for what may be the provocative point of view, that men are indeed less irrational than women. And this is due to a number of factors. 1. The science. The female brain has a larger corpus callus, which connects the two hemispheres. This means that the female brain utilizes more regions of the brain simultaneously. The male brain generally uses only one hemisphere of the brain at a time, particularly the left hemisphere, which is associated with logic and reason. Even when taken to an extreme level, like behavioral disorders like autism or Asperger's, the science still indicates that the male brain focuses heavily on the logic side, which leads to rational tendencies. 2. Nurturing. From a young age, boys were given toys that were soldiers and muscular, while girls were given dolls that cry real tears. To be a man, most men became able to suppress their emotions and not act on them, therefore allowing logic and reason to be the basis for decision making. Which leads us to point 3, choices. When choosing careers, most individuals pursue what they excel at, so it's no surprise that men, to a point, choose careers where they rely on their rational decision-making skills. If you use the definition STEM workforce, women make up only 28%. Therefore, if 72% are men in this field, and you have to make a lot of rational decisions, then it shows the strength that men can make rational decisions. In closing, you might assume that irrational decision-making is another way to say unwise decision. However, it's shown that decisions that are highly deliberated aren't necessarily better than the ones made with emotions. For example, a 17th century slaveholder. The rational decision would be to benefit the economy by owning another human being. But the right decision is not only to analyze the data, but to recognize how flawed their logic was. So although men make decisions more rationally, it doesn't mean that they turn out with better outcomes, because rational or irrational tells us how the decision was made, not the outcomes of those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel A. Counsel B, on your time.
Okay, so the dictionary definition of irrational is when something or someone is lacking the usual normal or mental clarity or coherence, or something not endowed with reasoning or understanding. And when people use the term irrational, they typically mean a demonstration of strong emotion in a situation where the observer doesn't think or understand why such emotion is warranted. The idea that a woman is acting irrationally is typically paired with the thought that being emotional leads to bad decisions, and this is associated with the sexist notion that women act on their emotions more than men. This is a lie. Research shows that you don't necessarily make better decisions if you don't let your emotions influence you. It's also proven that you can't make decisions without emotion, and it's also proven that emotion is what drives intelligent thought. The word emotional has a different meaning when it's used to refer to men and women. For example, when a woman acts emotionally in a situation, she is referred to as acting irrational, but when a man acts emotional in some way, such as crying at a sporting event, such as crying or getting frustrated at a sporting event, he is referred to as passionate. We have a history of thinking that women can't make good decisions due to their emotionality. In the 19th century, it was believed that women had a problem called hysteria, and hysteria was the idea that women were emotionally unstable and could most likely develop behavioral problems, and men couldn't develop this problem because they didn't have a uterus. Arguing that one gender over the other is more rational is a difficult argument to make. However, you could argue that men are less rational by discussing impulses. It's proven that men are considered to be more impulsive than women, and this may be due to testosterone. And making more impulsive decisions leads to less rational thinking because you don't take the time to discuss and think about all the options. You could also argue that men don't reach full mental maturity until 25, while women don't reach full mental maturity until 21. Having full maturity leads to better thought out and more rational life decisions, and there's no evidence that women are less rational than men. And you could argue that men are less rational based on impulsivity and the rate at which they mature.
Thank you, Counsel B. Counsel A, on your time.
My opponent brought up the argument of hormones and how sexism plays into this argument. And I agree that there is a dichotomy between rationality and emotion. In fact, both are needed for sound decision making. But I personally don't think that age equals accountability. Like here in the Innovation Diploma, age does not matter based on what you're able to do. And I think individuals should be able to engage their emotions while making decisions. And I echo what I said in my opening statement. Men do make decisions more rationally based on the science, the nurturing, and the choices that men make. Choices in careers, not choices of what they choose to be more rational about. But that doesn't mean that they turn out with better outcomes, because rational or irrational speaks to the decision process and not the outcomes. And another note, since we were able to choose our own topics, and this whole argument is irrational because we are both women, and I identify as a woman, so therefore men make less rational choices than women, or make more rational choices.
There you go. Council B.
Okay, so one of Claire's arguments is that the left hemisphere is associated with logic and males use this more. So you're essentially arguing that men act less on emotion and more on logic. And this isn't true because emotion is part of the decision making. And when you make a decision and you rely more on emotions, this doesn't lead necessarily to a less rational decision. So it's proven that emotion is what drives intelligent thought, so you don't necessarily make better decisions if you don't let your emotions influence you. And then with the whole accountability and age thing, this isn't about like accountability, it's about the decisions that you make and how you're mentally developed, and being more impulsive means, and if your brain doesn't develop until 25, you could argue that this means you can make more impulsive decisions because you don't think out all of the options and you're not fully mature, so you haven't experienced as much, you haven't been through as many experiences where you have to make good decisions. So in terms of rationality, you could say that having full mental maturity leads to better thought out and more rational life decisions, and there's no evidence that women are less rational than men when it comes to hormones and such. That's it.
Thank you. All right, Council A and Council B, you may step out the room, and I'll call you back in once the jury has come to the front of the room. Chamber.